So Starbucks buys more fair trade than any other coffee. I just want to make sure I'm not repeating myself. There's a fair trade blend. Cafe Estima is also a blend of fair trade coffees, but Starbucks uses fair trade coffee in many of our blends. So you'll see a lineup of coffees. If you see a coffee that says Sidamo, or if it says Colombia or Kenya, those are origin coffees. So all of the coffee that's in that bag is from that coffee of origin. If you see a coffee like Verona or House Blend or Espresso Roast, those are blends. We also purchase fair trade coffee to go into those blends, and they create certain flavor profiles. So the coffee that you're purchasing from Starbucks that says fair trade coffee on it is not the only fair trade coffee that you're purchasing. It's the only, when you have fair trade on as the label, it can only be fair trade. It can't be blended. Okay. Because different sources can be combined to meet different taste profiles, the use of fair trade beans is not 100%, so the blends cannot be marked fair trade. Going forward, Starbucks will continue to seek high-quality fair trade coffee to fulfill the commitment to purchase approximately 5% of our purchase annually being fair trade as a way of supporting the network of fair trade registered coffee cooperatives. So here are a couple of the challenges that we find in being 100% sellers of fair trade coffee. So one of them is no quality requirements. So the certification for fair trade, they have a quality requirement, but that quality is based on the market demand. So when you saw the black gold film that you saw today, the demand, all of that coffee that was being tasted and roasted and gone through, that's not premium coffee or coffee that Starbucks would purchase. That is what you would see in canned coffee, Folgers coffee, those types of things. So there's no quality standards. In cafe practices, there are quality standards that raise the quality of product, which therefore raises the price in which it can be purchased by. Fair trade certified coffee accounts for approximately 4%. We discussed that already. So that's 4% of the world's coffee supply. There's 96%. The rest of the coffee out there is not fair trade coffee to be purchased. That's a whole lot of coffee. There's limitations to the current criteria, small farms, we talked about that. FTC producers are under legal obligation to cooperative and contracts default. They default when the price becomes so low that farmers go, as I said earlier, and sell outside of that co-op because they need to. They have to. So when they default, then the difference, or the 10 cents above the fair market trade price that goes to the certification process, is no longer there. They're not able to provide it through the co-op, so they don't get a certificate. They don't get certified as fair trade. It becomes complex. I'll try to keep it as simple as I can. And then finally, one of the other challenges that we find to having 100% fair trade coffee is 28 fair trade labels around the world. So the fair trade label that I described earlier that you see that's imported to the United States, 10% of that fair trade price, once again, goes to the fair trade certification process. Okay? So if you're buying fair trade in Ethiopia or in Colombia or any other country, each one gets the money for that certification process. So each country gets the money for that certification process to make it fair trade. They want an individual label to show that it's their fair trade coffee. So in order for us to sell fair trade around the entire world, we would have to have 28 labels on our coffee showing that we've certified it in 28 different countries. That makes sense. It makes it very challenging. Here's an area where you can help. Here's an area where everybody can help. We're looking for a generic's probably not the right word, but universal. We're looking for a universal fair trade label so that it prevents each company from having, or each country from having their own label. If we have a universal fair trade label that's global and around the world, that will allow coffee purchasers to purchase more fair trade coffee because it eliminates that roadblock of having them sell coffee in another country with their label. For example, last year, Canada sold out of their fair trade. We had warehouses in the United States who wanted to ship our fair trade coffee to Canada so that they can continue to sell fair trade in Canada. We couldn't do it because the coffee in our warehouses had the American fair trade label on it. Okay, so it's such a small thing. I mean, it sounds like such a simple thing, but it really complicates the process in the market. So Starbucks recognizes that high quality is an essential component to the business success. In 2001, Starbucks developed social responsibility coffee buying guidelines called CAFE Practices in conjunction with a nonprofit environmental organization called Conservation International. I'm sure you're all aware of them. CAFE Practices is a set of social and environmental guidelines for producing, processing, and buying coffee. So not just selling or not just purchasing. The guidelines encompass various sustainability measures that are defined in 28 criteria extending to both the farming and processing of coffee. These guidelines are designed to help Starbucks work with coffee farmers to ensure high-quality coffee and to promote equitability relationships with farmers, workers, and their communities, as well as to protect the environment. We invite our suppliers, as well as the entire coffee industry, Kraft and Sara Lee, to participate in CAFE practices as an incentive. As an incentive, Starbucks offers preferred purchasing status to those verified and approved suppliers. So the more points the higher that you score on the CAFE practices in terms of environmental, social, and sustainability, the higher you move up in our purchasing. We'll purchase more coffee from you. So CAFE practices, pretty intensive screen, but really here's just a breakdown of the evaluation and checklist. It's broken down into quality, accountability, economic accountability, social responsibility, and environmental leadership. So I think it's important. This is really the nuts and bolts and the meat of what you guys are interested in. This is how we measure who we're going to purchase coffee from, in addition to purchasing fair trade. So fair trade is one of the venues that we use to purchase coffee. CAFE practices is the one that we prefer, and here's why. In terms of product quality, Starbucks is committed to the best green coffee. It's essential to sustaining our business as well as our coffee industry. And as a sidebar note, I can tell you exactly why. It has to be 100% Arabica beans, and it has to be a high level of Arabica beans for our roasting methods and for our blending purposes. But that's a whole other topic. So it's what keeps us as a premium coffee roaster. Economic accountability. Anyone Starbucks purchases coffee from is required to submit evidence of payments made at all levels along our coffee supply chain, including receipts that indicate how much farmers were paid for their coffee. In terms of social responsibility, just as Starbucks has demonstrated its commitment to social responsibility through access to credit and social development programs and rewards, we ask that our farmers share the same commitment. When a supplier is participating in CAFE practices through verification, they need to demonstrate safe, fair, and humane working conditions, the protection of workers' rights and adequate living conditions, the minimum wage requirements, and child labor force discrimination criteria is mandatory. Once again, we work collaboratively with Conservation International, but also with many other non-governmental organizations. So it's not just us measuring the criteria of the farmer. Environmental leadership in growing and processing of coffee. Environmental measures must take place to manage waste, energy use, preserve biodiversity through shade-grown coffee, and to reduce agrochemical use. And that's in the bottom portion of this checklist. So CAFE practices, once again, is independently verified. It's not a certification process, so anyone can join it. CAFE practices uses an independent third-party organization to verify farmer practices in a scientific certification systems, an independent certification firm to train and audit their verifiers.